Hello, my name is Daniel. Welcome to my channel. I apologize for being absent for a week. Last week I was just not feeling well at all and figured instead of trying to push through a bunch of videos where was just dying in front of you, I would spare you that and just carry on into this next week. So I'm much better now, thank you. But at the moment, I have 2 weeks worth of reading to go through with you. Um, Fortunately, it's not a lot. I've only read a couple volumes, only completed a couple volumes anyway. So I'm just going to go through that real quick, just to catch you all up. The first book I read the past 2 weeks was Hilary Mantel's The Mirror and the Light. This is the third book in the I don't know what it's called, the Wolf Hall trilogy, the Thomas Cromwell trilogy that she wrote. I'm pretty sure this is probably the most famous series that she wrote before she passed away. The books were phenomenal, and this one was also just great. I loved it. I started reading them. I've had them on my shelf for ages, but it wasn't until Steve Donahue put out his Steve Tiberius Donahue, or STD, book club, where I decided to pick them up and start reading them. They haven't gotten to this volume yet, but I really just didn't want to wait. So I picked this up a couple weeks ago and just ate through it. I loved it. The writing is still really good. And now I think I want to do a future video on this entire series, because like it's so good, but I think I have some thoughts on it that I just don't want to do in a roundup video. So hopefully look forward to that. But if I had one criticism about this book, just in brief, I would say that I think she includes a bit more than the story needs. Um, it's really hard to even criticize that because everything is beautifully written from the start to the finish. It's really good, but I don't know how much of it always serves the story. Plus, in this book, there's a lot of payoffs to what happens in Wolf Hall, which is the first book in the trilogy, and because she wants to keep it so you can read just this one volume, she reintroduces material that we've seen in Wolf Hall, and I mean it's fine. I like I said, this if I had to rate it in the Goodreads sense, this would be a 5-star book, no question. But if I wanted to nitpick, I would say this more so than Bring Up the Bodies is definitely a companion piece to the first book. Um, if you for some reason only had to read two, I would read the first one and this one, and you'd get a pretty complete picture, minus the death of Anne Boleyn. So this was a great book. Highly recommend this trilogy if you haven't picked it up. Uh, it's really saying something because I want to reread this very soon. That doesn't really happen when I read three chunky books within a few months, but I think next year I might read through this trilogy again. It's just that well written. Can't wait to see the thoughts of the official book club once they get to this, but I loved it. It's great. It's also highly reflective, so I'm sorry if you can see everything in this room that is disgusting and not picked up. Also, this month was Sumerian September, or at least September was. I guess I'm filming this in October now, but Sumerian September, where we were supposed to read all of the works of Robert E. Howard and his Conan stories specifically. I had just recently read all of Conan in 2020. I just looked it up on my Goodreads, and that was when I read those. And I, at the time, didn't feel the need to pick up those stories again, but I was interested in reading more Conan. So I unwisely went to the well of Elspreg de Camp and Lynn Carter and read one of the pastiche novels that they put out in the 60s or 70s in their paperback line. And then once I read that, I'm like, oh, I really do want to revisit some Conan. So I did end up purchasing and rereading the first of the 3-volume set from Del Rey, The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian. Uh, I must say I love this way more this time around than the first time, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that. The stories do age well, and they have a timeless quality. So I think that you can go back to it like Italian food, lasagna, the next day and enjoy it just as much or even more uh, on a reread. That was a weird analogy, but you know what I'm saying. Like these are good to come back to, which is not always the case for short stories. Um, Full of adventure. Okay, there are a couple duds in here, but even the duds like had something interesting going on. If I wanted to like nitpick and pick a dud, I would say the Veil of Lost Women was kind of weak and a little problematic. Again, it's a product of its time, not as an excuse, but like you know, racial tensions and how women are treated was definitely a work in progress at the time. So anyway, beyond that though, the stories in here were really good. Uh, in going back to it, I don't even remember reading The Devil in Iron. Like I have no memory of this story. So like it's like I got a bonus in this of a Howard story I had never read or just completely forgot about. Like I said, I read this in 2020, and that's when I was having a lot of health issues, and everyone and their mother was laid off from their jobs for obvious reasons. So I don't think I was in a great mindset for reading this and enjoying it to its fullest potential. Um, I was in and out of the hospital quite a lot, not related to like the pandemic, but just for my own personal stuff. So reading this while in immense amounts of pain was probably not the best way to enjoy it. So I do want to pick up eventually the rest of the volumes here and give them a reread. I think I only rated the second volume of this 3 stars, and if it's anything like how much more I loved it this time around, I think that's gonna improve. Um, that volume has like the longest Conan story, the only novel or novella length one, and yeah, I'm interested in seeing how I react to it now that I am in a much better place than all of us were in 2020. So this was really good, and I'm glad I decided to go back to it. Uh, those were the only sorry, Conan. Those were the only books I have finished so far. I did read a lot of comics. Not pictured here because I have nothing to show you because this was like 2 weeks ago. But I've read volumes 9 and 10 of The Boys, which was Garth Ennis, I think, wrote that, and it's basically most of you will probably know it from the Amazon show. It's about superheroes in the modern world, but with very cynical sensibilities. So like they're awful people doing awful things, and so there's this group of um, this like offshoot of the CIA that are called the Boys, and they basically are a countermeasure to superheroes who sort of go off the rails. Um, the, it's a very popular Amazon show, so you probably, if you read anything about comics, you probably are familiar with the Boys. I haven't read the series in its entirety yet. Like I said, I've only gotten through volumes 9 and 10 recently, and it's okay. I really liked the earlier volumes. It was just pure trash, which is like in the Garbogustian sense, where this is mindless violence and like what's the word for it? It's sensationalized and meant to make you feel really grimy and cynical. It's fun, and then I think the author kind of gets a little full of his own story where he thinks he's telling this great story, so we need all this background information. So in these volumes, like you have a lot of characters just sitting and listening to the history of how superheroes got to where they are today, and it really isn't what I want in this series. I must say I do like this show a lot more than the Amazon show. I tried watching that. Again, that was sort of during the darker time when I just was not feeling well at all. So I bounced off of it because I didn't need that much cynicism in my life in addition to everything else that was going on. So I do want to give that another shot, but I do want to also finish the series. Like it grabbed me in the early stages of the comic. I only have two more volumes to go. I'm hoping we're done with all the history lessons, so we can get to the action packed conclusion. But I mean, I don't dislike it, but like it got to points where I was getting a little bored, and that's not what you want to be when you're reading a comic. Like there's only so much story to go around in a comic, so like it needs to be a little bit more snappy than what these volumes have provided. So it's okay. So far, so good. But something I did enjoy a little bit more, going back to Sumerian September, um, was Conan the Barbarian, the Marvel comic. Uh, just wanted to read a few of the first issues of this. Um, when was this written? I don't know if it says. Well, this document is from like 2019, but these these were written by Roy Thomas, and the art was by Barry Smith. It's really good looking. Um, Editor Stan Lee, of course. Let's see if I can find something interesting to show you. This comic does suffer quite a bit from the Comics Code Authority. The most action you're gonna see, I don't know how well that's gonna focus. There's a lot of wrestling happening, and then people suddenly dying in the midst of that wrestling. I don't think the standards of the Comics Code Authority did Conan any favors as far as just violence. It's kind of a big part of Conan. So, but I went in expecting that, and for what they have to work with, these are actually really fun. Um, I do want to see what the magazines like Savage Sword of Conan put out, because I think they were less restrictive because they weren't part of the Comics Code Authority. And I do have access to them, so I'll get to them eventually. But the stories in this they felt very Howard-esque. In some cases, they were like stories that were, repurposed. Like I think the second issue was Conan and the Beastmen, or that's not the name of the book, but like that's essentially what it is. He fights a bunch of Beastmen in some subterranean city, but the opening to that story is very much like the Frost Giant's daughter. Is that what it's called? The Frost Giant's daughter. The story where he's like chasing a scantily clad or naked woman through the snow. They definitely modified that to be a little less rapey than the original story sort of suggests, which is fine. Like it's a comic, and you want to have like a bigger audience, but like the stories follow a very sword and sorcery flow that I think works really well. Something I noticed in the letters page at the back of the books was that some people complained, oh, there's just too much action in Conan. So anyway, that is the other set of comics I've been reading, and I'll probably continue to read those. Enjoyed it quite a bit. But as to what I'm reading now, oh shoot, it's not here. One moment, I am back. Sorry. So the first thing I'm reading is New Edge Sword and Sorcery Magazine, issue 0. This is the fall 2022 issue that is sort of their promotional issue. They did a Kickstarter for the first two official magazines, but I don't know if they've gone out yet. I don't think so. But this is freely available online, or you can go onto Amazon and get it print on demand really affordably. So far, this is essentially sword and sorcery magazines with a more modern sensibility. So like you get the action that you're used to, but maybe there's a little bit less sexism, a little bit less racism. and you'll see like more inclusivity between like what the hero looks like, and I was interested in that, but there seems to be kind of a flaw in the stories I've read so far. I want to point out I'm not done with the magazine yet, so maybe I will be pleasantly surprised in the future. But so far, like the characters have sort of just been a palette swap, which is not really as interesting a choice as if say you wanted a female barbarian type like Conan. Um, you could do it in a way where she fundamentally fights differently than you'd see like the just the superhero action man guy. How would she approach it? Like that could be a very interesting story. But so far, all I've seen is like, yeah, she just as tough as nails can lop a man in half, and I've seen that in a lot of like modern fantasy stories, and it's fine, but it's less interesting than what you could do with a character who's just fundamentally different than the norm. Right now, we're just getting more of the norm with just like a palette swap. It's not as interesting as it could be, and that's my big critique. Again, that's only a couple stories in here. Maybe there will be something for what I'm looking for in this, but we'll see. Finally, the other thing I am reading just disappeared because my Kindle Fire is old. There we go. Um, the clinical applications of polyvagal theory. This, I'm not going to keep showing that because it's just going to reflect light everywhere. This is just a book that was recommended to me by someone in the industry. I am not a clinician, but I am interested in psychology, especially this year. I've gotten a little bit more into it and like disorders and things like how we get from like A to B to C. Um, the polyvagal theory in a nutshell, I am probably not going to explain this very well, but basically your reaction to stress appears to be controlled by your vagal nerve that runs throughout your body in different branching paths. And we have a couple phases. We have like a phase where you're just sort of like in rest. That's when you're open to like communication and socializing, and you can your body functions like it heals faster and whatnot. That's like the ideal place to be if you are actually in a place of safety. And then when you're introduced to stress, you go into like a fight or flight mode, um, and like that's when like you're pumped and ready for action, and your body responds accordingly automatically without you thinking about it. And then there's another state where you just shut down completely. This doesn't happen with every animal, but it does happen with a lot of mammalian animals. And so that's like I don't know if it's like a way of conserving energy necessarily, but when you get to a level where you're like bound, you can't move, you just sort of disassociate and turn off. Um, or like there's other circumstances where you just feel hopeless and you shut down, and then you just like a lot of people I guess can get stuck in the either the active state or the shutdown state. And then there's like this dysregulation between your actual environment and how your autonomic nervous system processes the the world around you, and like things aren't lining up. Like you need to be able to resolve the stress that's like coursing through your nerves. And so like I guess this theory helps clinicians come up with a method of getting you from like that point of like you're shutting off or you're like hyper vigilant and hyper aroused. I don't know the actual words for these, to a point of where you're safe, and safety is like the goal essentially. Um, that was like the trash layman's way of explaining polyvagal theory, but apparently it's there's not a lot of popular books about it yet. I think I can think of two, and this is one of them. So it's not really written for the layman. So I'm interpreting it as best I can in my dumb ninth grade brain. So, anyways, it's interesting, but like the presentation lacks a little something. That's all I'm gonna say. Get a little bored sometimes, and sometimes it's just good to have like a dictionary around to help explain it to you. So again, it's not written for me. I can't really fault it for that, but I am learning a little bit something about the polyvagal theory. I just don't know how much of it is going to be applicable to my life, other than the fact that one of the methods of making someone feel safe is to feel it yourself, and like their autonomic nervous system will sort of see you and regulate based off of you. So you need to like regulate yourself to help regulate your patient, which I mean kind of seems like common sense, but maybe they just needed a methodology of explaining it. Like I, in a lot of the articles in this book, they're basically saying we were delighted to find out that this model explains why this is so successful. That this thing we're already doing. So, um, I don't know if I recommend it, but it's kind of interesting, in a very dull way. If that makes sense. So anyway, that's all I have to share with you today. Um, I will come back with a little bit more spooky stuff and probably more sword and sorcery because I'm just really in a mood to read more. I think I'll shelve Conan for now, but I got plenty more that I never got to in Sumerian September, so I will continue with that. Anyways, have a good one. I will talk to you later. Thank you.